What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Against the Spread College Edition podcast. Got my boy Rich and Beej with me like I do every week. What's up, guys?
How we doing?
Big championship weekend last week. Pretty exciting games, honestly. I know a lot of things happened that we weren't really expecting, but also some things we did expect happen. So all around, really good week. If you guys have nothing to begin the podcast with, let's go ahead and jump into these games.
I mean, I'll just yell out a quick Roll Tide.
Hey, we'll get there. So first, we got Washington, Oregon. Bo Nix, in my opinion, looked really shaky in the first half, and I think that partially is due to him never being able to perform in big games. In the second half, it obviously looked like he calmed down a little bit. I think they did do well in the second quarter, but second half is really where he started to look more like way more comfortable in the game. And the offense as a whole looked great. I don't think he even had crazy great stats, but he did look way better in the second half. Obviously, Penix comes out and deals. I mean, the whole game he was just dealing, ended with about 320 yards. I think a big X factor for Washington was their running back finishing with over 150 rushing yards against an Oregon defense that has been performing fairly well the whole year. And especially a team that we had in our top four, Oregon over Washington with how they've been playing, kind of is crazy to me how bad their defense looked against certain things that we thought they were going to like dominate in. Like their rush defense just wasn't there. And I don't know if that's because of your passing threat with Michael Penix and all of his weapons that he has. I don't know if that's a big reason or if the reason is because Oregon just didn't come out to play like or like got out schemed. You know, there's multiple things that can fall into it, but I'll pass it over to you, Brennan. What did you think about this one?
I mean, definitely a big shocker for the boys. We thought Oregon was going to come out and dominate this one. Washington had not looked good since they played Oregon. Really just skating by all their opponents, did not look like a top team. So we were holding on to that assumption that Oregon was just much better as they were handling everybody easily. And, they came out flat. I mean, they ended up turning around in the second half, but they couldn't overcome the deficit. They had a chance. Penix threw an interception. Oregon could have gotten the ball, taken the lead, but guess what Bo Nix did? Threw it right back to him. So, or I can't remember. Did it go that way? I think it was Washington first, then Oregon back.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, so.
I was like, this is game. This is game.
Yeah.
Oregon's going to score.
So, yeah, I mean, you can't do that in a game like this. And like Rich was speaking about before the pod, man, this is the Washington team we hadn't seen since they played Oregon. So very surprising, but kudos to Washington. We'll see them in the playoff.
Yeah, and just to allude on some of your points, we haven't seen that Washington team. And then on top of that, I think the run game for Washington has slowly come around to an actual run game. At the beginning of the year, it seemed like Penix was going to have to throw for 330 every time he got on the field for them to win a game. But now it seems like their defense is making kind of those like key stops. Not that they're going to make every stop, but like a key stop here and there. And then Penix is going to punish you for not scoring the next drive. And then, with the support of the run game, I think, Washington could give Texas some troubles, but they looked really, really good in this game. I was thoroughly impressed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a little surprising, especially for us. We had them as one of our best bets, Oregon taking care of business, but just didn't turn out that way. And that's what can happen on championship weekend. So you kind of get those guys that are going to Oregon really, or Washington actually really turned around and kind of gave the middle finger to everybody that's been counting them off since they beat Oregon. And that's what you want from a team. And that's what you want a team that's going to be in the playoff is to make a stand, play their championship game, and really show why they should be in it. And they did exactly that. So nothing but kudos to Washington for proving us wrong and pretty much the whole country who doubted them in the end. Let's move on to this next game. We got Texas, Oklahoma State. Um,
Snooze fest.
I mean, we luckily, guys, we did have Texas as one of our best bets. So we did go 1-1 this week. That was a big one for us, getting this as a whole. That was a big one for us, is getting Texas to win this Big 12 championship. I really thought this, like, they were going to take care of business. I didn't think it was going to be close, and it wasn't. Let me see just some of my things I have. I mean, you have Ollie Gordon just completely getting stonewalled all game. And once you make him disappear for Oklahoma State, their whole offense just kind of shuts down, because their whole offense runs through him. And once he just can't run the ball, then he had to go to being more of a receiving back. And I think he did that. But yeah, so that was kind of telling right there. And then Texas, I think that on all other points, their offense really just clicked this game, and there was no hesitation. There was no, oh, is Sarkisian going to put his foot on the pedal? He did exactly what we wanted him to do. The past 3 weeks, he's really done that, and I think that's what's pushed them and kind of propelled them into that playoff, is really how they've handled the last couple games and beating teams by a lot when they should beat these teams by a lot. That was something that we talked about earlier in the season that they weren't doing. They're beating these teams by 3 points that they should be beating by 20. What's going on? This isn't a playoff team. And then the past couple weeks, they've just really turned it on and really wanted to hammer down that, hey, we're better and we can be. So I love that point from them. Brennan, you got anything on this one?
No, you hammered down on the point of Ollie Gordon, man. I mean, if we talked about one way Oklahoma State could possibly win this game, it was Ollie Gordon having a day of his life against a great front seven in Texas. I mean, they might be the best front seven in college football after watching that. But yeah, Oklahoma, I mean, there's no shot you're relying on Alan Bowman to beat a Texas team with this kind of talent, those kind of wide receivers. I mean, they're going to put up some points no matter who they're playing. I mean, Texas is looking pretty scary. If I had a team I wouldn't want to play in the college football playoff, it'd be them. I just know their secondary is a little weak, so they can get beat over the top. But unfortunately, Oklahoma State is not that team to do that. So this game went about how we expected it. And I mean, Quinn Ewers, 4 touchdowns in the first half. Jesus, I mean, looking great. Threw the ball 46 times. Good Lord, 35 for 46, 452 yards. Yeah, it's gonna be a tough wide receiving core and quarterback duo to stop here in the playoffs, and I expect big things from them. I mean, I knew that last year, whenever they played Alabama super close, I knew this team had a lot of talent, and I knew they were going to put it together eventually. I thought they were going to do it last year, but they didn't. But definitely not surprised with how they've played this year, and they've shown that they want it, man. Like you said, those last 2 weeks, they really put the pedal to the floor, and they're like, hey, we're one of the best 4 teams in the country.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing Quinn Ewers really come around. Granted, the talent he's played isn't amazing, but I will say that the last 2 weeks have been scary if you're watching those games. He's just been able to make the passes that you thought he was always going to be able to make. I think a little bit of that had to do with the injury that he did have. He had to get back into football form. But he's back now, and him and these receivers are terrifying, even though they're missing their star running back. Yeah, I think that in Washington's going to be a nice little shootout we got going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hopefully that Washington or Texas can kind of slow down that Washington team a little bit. I think if you let this Texas team get rolling, though, as Washington, like you're gonna be in trouble, because they're gonna be able to stop your run, I think, and then you're gonna kind of be one dimensional. And Texas, I think, can run the ball, and with Cedric Baxter especially, and then they're also going to be able to throw all over you with Xavier Worthy, and then Xavier Worthy, and then AD Mitchell. Yep. So that's a tough bunch to play. It's a great offensive weapons that they have over there. I mean, before we played Alabama this past weekend, Georgia, I thought that Texas was the only team that I really didn't want to play at the moment. I think they're one of the hottest teams right now. And it's all about, especially in November and December, you get these teams where, okay, who's the hottest team right now? Who are these teams that are going into the playoff hot? And you kind of have that with Texas, obviously, and you have that with Alabama. So They're the teams that are rolling, and those are the two teams I expect to be in the national championship, in my opinion. So
A rematch, baby. Come on.
let's head on into the Louisville Florida State game. Just because we have to talk about it, obviously, but I don't know, man. It's like you're playing with your third string quarterback as Florida State, and I really feel bad for the team because their defense, in all honesty, is probably top 3 in the country with how good they are. They're such a solid team, and they're so good defensively, and their offense has so many weapons, man. But when you have your third string true freshman quarterback playing, you're not going to be able to do what you were with Jordan Travis. He's not going to be able to get out of the pocket like him. He's not going to be able to take those hits like he did. He's not going to be able to throw the ball, especially with how much experience that Jordan Travis had. I think a lot of people are not understanding how much experience Jordan Travis has had. He's been at Florida State for a minute, and he's really been with them through their bad and now through the good. So he's grown a lot as well. So that's a guy who has played a lot of snaps, and then you're going to a true freshman who hasn't played at all, really, with Rodemaker getting a concussion last week. And I don't even know why he was allowed back into that game last week when he clearly had a concussion. Clearly. I mean, the kid
that makes no sense.
Dude, the kid was – they did a close-up on him. The kid was cross-eyed after he got hit. And then they let him back in after 2 snaps. I'm like, this kid is – they told him how to answer those questions for the concussion test. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't – I don't think they would have won that game if he wasn't in anyway in that Florida game. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I think that their offense just wasn't moving. And their offense wasn't going to move without Jordan Travis. And that's ultimately why they are not in the playoff. So.
Yeah, I think but also it was a rainy game. So, I mean – let's give Florida State's offense a little bit, maybe not. No credit. They ran the ball efficiently. They ran the ball efficiently though against a pretty good Louisville run defense. They did shut down a top 20 offense, but other than that,
their defense is elite. Their defense is elite.
It really sucks. You know, they're a very elite defense, and they're getting hot at the right time, and then their offense can't get hot. You know, just can't. So. They won the game, and they are undefeated ACC champions. We'll probably talk about this later in the podcast. I have a sneaking suspicion.
I don't have too much to add to that. Just tough for Florida State to lose their guys and Jordan Travis, but I mean, you got to show that you can at least do somewhat on offense, like 55 passing yards in an entire game. Like that's one pass. You know, you get that on one pass. So it's just like, I mean, the ability of that offense.
Like Carson Beck.
Which obviously Rodemaker, I mean, if they were in the playoffs, you know, Rodemaker would be the guy. But, I mean, even he against Florida
even with him
had like 140 passing yards or something like that. I mean, so it's tough for them. But, hey, they won the ACC championship. They can look back and, you know, say, hey, we might have gotten screwed, but they didn't have to go and get embarrassed by Michigan. So
very true. Let's head on into this next game. Pretty tough one for your boy here, Brennan. I know you have something to say. What'd you want to say at the beginning of the pod?
Roll Tide, baby, roll Tide.
Yep. So you know, I'll kind of give my 2 cents on the game, and I'll pass it to you, Beej. Georgia's offense pretty much moved the ball down the field without. It looked like there wasn't even a defense going against them in the first drive. Just completely scripted that perfectly by Bobo. And then after that, their starting right tackle, Amarius Mims, gets hurt. They put Xavier Truss in. He changes up what he wants to do because of that. So they're not throwing the ball as much, and you see them start running the ball more and trying to do some stuff they weren't expecting to do so early, running outside against a team that you obviously know is going to be ready for outside runs or too fast for that. And up the middle, I think that this is what I heard someone say, and I really agree with this. I don't think that Nick Saban thought they could stop us up the run or up the middle with the run. And I think Georgia thought we couldn't run up the middle. So I think there was 2 different looks at the game going into it. I think our offense didn't think we could run up the middle on you guys at all. And so we tried to run outside. Bama didn't think you were even going to try to run outside, and they thought you were just going to gap them up the middle. So they were loading boxes and they weren't really kind of ready for the outside runs, but their cornerbacks and safeties just really flooded very well and came downhill. So that was a really huge adjustment that Bama made was, okay, we don't have to actually slant so much inside because they're not going to run and up the middle against us. Let's just play wide and play our gaps and play gap sound. And then we're going to just be able to do what we want to do against them. And their defense played phenomenal in the first half against Georgia. Georgia couldn't move the ball really. It was a 10-13 game. Then that fourth down play happens with Isaiah Bond. In real time, I was like, okay, well, they had to have reviewed that. Like they thought it was a catch, it's a catch, whatever. Or maybe they thought it was too close to overturn. So they didn't even review it. I think in the big game like that, you have to at least review it or at least stop it and just see if you can. And that's what's upsetting is like you don't even get that chance as Georgia because it was a fourth down play. There was a minute and 30 seconds left. You know Georgia is going to get the ball back right there and probably get a field goal, if not score a touchdown. And that changes, a big aspect of the game. But the biggest things for Georgia in this game were, did you make the last mistake in the game and how detrimental was it? We missed a field goal earlier in the game, and then in the second half, we fumbled on our own. I think it was like
That was
15
a
or
terrible
10.
play call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Awful.
we ran the same play against Georgia Tech and got 30 yards on it, right? I don't think it was a bad play call. If you look at the play, it was wide open. Carson Beck tried to do the exact same thing he did in the Georgia Tech game, which fake up the middle, no look, and then he just tries to flick it back. You can't fucking no look against Bama, okay? Especially on your own 10. You're not no looking this fucking ball, right? Like,
Yeah.
no way you just did that. So you make big mistakes in big games like this, and especially if you're the last team to make a mistake, you're going to lose. Now, Georgia only ends up losing by 3 points because their defense just completely shut down Bama in the third and like halfway through the fourth quarter. Made them punt like 5 times. And then I think they also scored one of those times as well. But they really did just take over in the second half. And for the most part, they shut Jalen Milroe's run game down, except for that last drive where Jalen Milroe had that long run. But other than that, Georgia really shut down his running opportunities. And I thought that was an extremely good job on how they schemed that. But they spied 2 guys the majority of the time and gave him a lot of time to throw downfield. And I think that also hurt Georgia a little bit. So there's a lot of things that happened in the game. I think Georgia lost the game themselves. I don't think they really got beat, but you can't say that because obviously they lost the game. But I think they beat themselves more than anything. And you can't do that in an SEC championship game. That's the hardest game to play in college football.
Yeah, and Brennan, I'll save it for you at the end because you're the winner here. Yeah, I think I think they got a little bit cute with that play call. I know they ran it against Tech. Now that you mention it, but yeah, I think that play call was a little bit cute inside your own like 20 basically, and then I think the Alabama response in the fourth quarter to that Georgia touchdown was kind of like the dagger, and that was a great drive from Milroe. Him and Bond are very, very. I feel like that's a good connection they got going on. Everybody thought it was going to be the guy that transferred Burton from Georgia. He did catch a touchdown, but I think Bond's way better than Burton. And personally, I don't like Burton. So, yeah, the response right there was
I don't
really
think
the
Bama
dagger.
fans even like Burton, honestly.
Yeah.
You see the shit he was doing after the game.
Yeah, he's a little over the top, but
Come on,
dude,
man, play
it's so
football.
funny. It's like that's why he's not on Georgia anymore. It's because he's such a shit person. But
yeah, you just don't have a lot of guys like that on Alabama or Georgia that like to show their ass a lot,
I
just don't think like
Nick
Nick Saban and Kirby Smart just don't deal with that shit. And and I think the only reason why Nick Saban deals with it is because Jermaine has a good rapport with Milroe.
Yeah.
And I think they play really well because I think if this was any other era of Nick Saban, like give it 5 years ago, I think he would have been kicked off the team. After last year when like he like pushed over the girl Tennessee fan. Like I think he would have been kicked off the team then.
Yeah.
So,
but Saban
Nick
defended
Saban,
that nonsense.
well, Nick Saban in his later years now coaching has been more understanding and more about teaching than he is about just like straight up getting you the fuck out of there if you're a bad kid. Like now he's more like I'm giving people chances to grow as a person, which I think is a good thing. But with Jermaine Burton, I don't think he's a good person at all. And I think NFL teams are going to straight up skip on him and he's not going to get drafted pretty high, which he should, but he's not going to because of his attitude and the way he acts. Because no one wants another Antonio Brown. But go ahead, Brennan.
Yeah, no, I mean this one's just real sweet for us Bama fans, given it's not very often we're the underdogs in games, and especially in a year like, I mean, I know I got a lot more confident towards the end of the year, but I mean, we were talking, Zach, before the game. It's like I had the lowest expectations, and it's usually not the case for an Alabama fan. You know, usually we're full SEC champ, national champ every single year, but with Georgia coming on as of late, it's been like, shit, dude, now we got to play Georgia in the SEC championship. Hopefully we can beat them. I mean, being a 6-point underdog, I think that was like our biggest underdog line in Saban's history probably. So, I mean, this one was real sweet for the guys. I mean, but just an absolute dogfight. All these stats, I'm looking at these stats, man. It's kind of insane how eerily similar they are. I mean, Georgia was 4 for 12 on third downs. Bama was 3 for 13. Both were 2 for 2 on fourth downs. 321 yards to 306 in Georgia's favor. Georgia had the slight edge in passing. Bama had the slight edge in rushing. Time of possession was 31-29 Bama. But, yeah, I mean, like you said, missed field goal by Georgia after a false start, pushed them back 5 yards. Maybe they don't make that false start, that kick might go in. And then the fumble on y'all's side of the territory, which I looked at Zach. We were watching the game together, and when y'all held us to a field goal, I was like, if y'all win, that's the stop of the game right there. I mean, we were on the 5-yard line and couldn't get it in the end zone. So
I agree. I mean, I thought it was the same thing. I was like, if we win, it's because we just stopped them right there. But I also thought we could lose by a field goal, and it'll be because we just gave you a free possession.
Yeah.
And we were like, I think Georgia lost that game themselves. They made all these mistakes and all these things happen. And it's the most penalties they've ever got in a game. And it's literally, Brennan, I don't know if you know this. I saw this stat. It is not one of our defensive linemen scored above an 80 on a PFF score. That's the first time that's happened in 20 years at Georgia.
Wow.
That's how bad our defensive line played. So like when you take
definitely
all
saw
these things,
sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just like when you take all these things into account, like of course you're going to lose a game. Like, and you only lost it by 3. You only lost it by 3, and that's how bad you played. That's incredible. Like if I'm them, I'm like, that's incredible that we only lost by 3 and we made that many mistakes. That's how much better I think Georgia is.
I also think Georgia's offensive line played pretty poorly for the majority of the game. Y'all could not get a run game going. If you take the Kendall Milton like 20-yard run out, y'all don't have a rusher.
Why do we start
40.
running? Okay, yeah, but why were we running outside on this Bama team when we could run inside zones on them? And when we ran inside zone on them, we got 20 fucking yards and then 14 the next time. But we're running outside, we're running sweeps against Bama. When the fuck have you ever been able to run sweeps against Bama or Georgia?
We have a very side-to-side, linebackers, and our DBs come up great and fill those holes on edge rushes. It's like, it's hard to have successful plays like that against speedy, big motherfuckers, the guys that can get to the sideline in a hurry. So, yeah, I mean, I think the defense stepped up and made some great plays. And luckily we were on the side of, Georgia just kind of shooting themselves in the foot on one drive. And that was kind of the game changer right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I already see people calling for Bobo's head in Georgia. Like, dude, what the fuck? He had a great offensive season. I
also wanted to say one more thing. I think one of the players of the game, silent players of the game was Trey Amos, the cornerback that came in for Kool-Aid and Kinstry.
Yeah,
dude. And immediately got targeted. I mean, y'all were on like the 10-yard line. Immediately got targeted covering Brock Bowers pass break up. Then got targeted on a big third down later in the game against Lad McConkey. Should have intercepted that ball. But, I mean, I think Alabama had 4 balls they could have picked off in that game, dropped them. Georgia probably had two that they could have picked off
A
that they
lot of
didn't
bad
have. So
throws. Yeah, that
yeah,
should have been
yeah.
big
I mean,
plays.
it
Well, it
was
was
it
just
was just
dude. The defenses were set up
yeah.
perfectly. Like
Hmm.
Georgia and Alabama were just defensively just
Yeah.
gurus in that game. Like both, like I would give it up to both defensive coordinators. Really, just
Yeah.
had a game. Both of them did.
Yep.
So like the way Georgia stopped Milrow was insane to me. Help like
Hmm.
holding him like that, and then playing guys that we haven't played. Like, dude, we were playing guys on our defensive line and linebackers we haven't played all year, really.
Yeah.
And they were getting sacks and like tackles for
Yeah.
losses. I'm like, why the fuck aren't these guys playing all year? But
Yep.
yeah,
Well, that
like I
kind
mean,
of ended up coming back to bone, y'all, because on the wheel route they ran, that linebacker got. I think he was a freshman linebacker. He
oh
got
no, dude,
greedy and bumped that
that's
guy and didn't get out.
yeah, that's Marvin Jones Jr. He's a true freshman, but that guy's
He's gonna be good, yeah, but that's
that
supposed to read
guy's
a
gonna be
freshman.
great. Yeah, but I mean
Yeah.
that's the thing. I think if you keep Jalen Walker in that situation, he sticks him at the line. But no one touches him. He goes by free and just gets a wide open run. But that I mean that game that didn't kill us. I mean
Yeah.
that wasn't the
It didn't kill you,
dagger in the
obviously.
game.
That's just
So
At the end of the day, there were 17.5 million people watching this game, and they were all watching the national championship being played. So that's what happened in that game.
Yep, I agree. Let's go ahead and go on to our next segment. We're going to talk a little bit about a big topic right now, guys. Obviously, we're going to talk about the transfer portal. I don't know. This is kind of something I think we want to bring up a little bit more in the podcast as it's going on. This is going to be something that's pretty big, obviously. Before now, it used to be like high school signing day was huge. Now it's like your transfer portal opening up day is huge. Like over 1,000 players popped into it yesterday. That really hurts high school recruiting a lot because as a college coach, if you are looking in the portal, most of these kids already know where they want to go. As a high school recruit, you're getting recruited, you drop a top 10, you drop a top 5, you drop a top 3, and then you commit after 10 months, 12 months. A portal kid is going to commit to you probably the day of as they enter if they already know where they want to go because they've already been in contact with you, and then you're already going to have a new quarterback that's going to be able to come in and start, or a new running back that's going to be able to come and start immediately. Any position player that you need come in and start immediately. It's not going to happen that much as a true freshman, especially in the SEC or the Big Ten or any of these big schools, Power 5 conferences. So that's pretty big. Let's kind of talk about some of the notable guys that jumped in. We got DJU, obviously, hopping in again, leaving Clemson, going to Oregon State, and now he's hopping in again. Top two schools for him are going to be Florida State and Louisville right now. I think that'd be pretty cool for him, obviously, to come back and play Clemson at one of those schools, Louisville or Florida State. That'd be pretty nice for him. I think he deserves to go to a team that, one, has a conference, and then two, is going to kind of let him or conform to him and let him play around them. So I think that's going to be cool for him. Obviously, you have Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma jumped in, and he's looking like he's going to head to Oregon. That's kind of the outlook on everybody has that outlook on him. I think that'll be great for Oregon, obviously, to jump in and kind of get a guy that is well seasoned and just had a phenomenal year at Oklahoma, and now going to go to a Oregon team who is going into the Big Ten and
So
possibly.
Zach, do we think like Brent Venables was just like, yeah, I don't know if you're going to be the starter next year? Like, why the hell is he transferring? He's been starting quarterback for the last 2 years.
Well, yeah,
It's
that's a big thing because they have that they have the freshman there, Arnold, and it kind of looks like he was a little bit too good. And Brent Venables probably said, "Hey, I think it's time for him to take the reins on this offense since he's going to lead it for the next 3 years and already get him in there. And if you're thinking about the NFL or you're thinking about going somewhere else, I think you should kind of head in that direction." So
yeah.
especially as if you're Dylan Gabriel, you don't want to go somewhere where you have to fight for a position. I think you want to go somewhere or stay somewhere where you're going to win so you can go to the NFL next year or after next year. So I think that's what he's doing. Obviously, you got Brock Vandagriff from Georgia heading in to the portal. A lot of Georgia people think that means Carson Beck's going to stay. I just want to let you guys know there's 2 top 10 quarterbacks that are coming from high school as well. That might be a contributing factor, especially the number 1 quarterback in the nation or number 2, depending on where you're looking at, coming into Georgia. I think that's a big reason as well, Dylan Raiola. So that's big. But if Carson does come back, I think it would definitely obviously, I think he'd be the number 1 drafted quarterback, him or Quinn Ewers next year. So that's huge for him. And then, you have some – who's the other quarterback? Obviously, you have Riley Leonard that's going to
probably Notre
he's probably
Dame.
going to go to Notre Dame. I think that's what everyone's saying.
And then
from
Dante
Texas
Moore, the UCLA quarterback.
Oh yeah, Dante Moore from Michigan originally.
Yeah.
So in high school, he wanted to go out west. He wanted to go to Oregon originally. Then he flipped to UCLA for a big NIL contract. Don't think it's been exactly what he thought it was going to be there money-wise. And I also don't think they gave him a lot of opportunity in the beginning of the season. Stats weren't that great. Ended up playing more towards the end. But I think he wants to go back home. And Michigan obviously needs a quarterback now with J.J. McCarthy leaving. So
I'm looking at it now. Did we say Brock Vandagriff is all the way committed to Kentucky?
He's not, but is
247
pretty much
100%.
That's a crystal ball.
Okay.
So, so right now, Brock Vandagriff is the schools he's mainly talking to right now: Kentucky, South Carolina, and I think he's also talking to Mississippi State a little bit and Auburn.
What about Georgia Southern?
I think he's a little bit better than Georgia Southern.
Yeah,
I really do think that it's either Kentucky or Auburn. Auburn's getting all these 5-star wide receivers right now and all these big commits. I think you need to get a quarterback in the portal. If you don't think that Holden Geriner kid from Savannah, that's like a sophomore or junior now, if you don't think he's going to be your guy, you need to go in the portal and get somebody. It is kind of telling because he didn't play and he was behind Peyton Thorne, who couldn't throw the ball 5 fucking yards. So it's a little telling that I don't think they think he's the guy. So they're trying, obviously, to go in this portal and get a quarterback, and I think that's what they're going to do. Hopefully they can get Brock, because I don't think Kentucky's the place to be, in my opinion, for him. I think that offense is losing. They're losing their offensive coordinator, I think. So I don't really think that's a good place. And I think the way that Hugh Freeze is running that Auburn team right now, it's looking like that would be the place to go. But this is something we're going to talk about every week. If you guys also want to comment and talk about any person or any team individually, and for something for us to bring up in the pod, like, hey, is this team looking at anybody? Is this person leaning anywhere? What are we thinking? So that's kind of where my mindset is. I think that I would love for you guys to kind of jump in the comments. Brennan, Rich, you guys have anything to say about the transfer portal at this time?
How about Ohio State? Well, they got like 11 guys hopping in already. Jesus. Yeah. I don't know what the hell's going on there. But yeah, I mean, obviously Kyle McCord headed out. I think Ryan Day just came up to him and said, buddy, we're going to, you did great, but we're going to go and try to find somebody. I was seeing that he's looking at Iowa or Miami. That would be pretty funny for him to go to Iowa and turn around and beat Ohio State next year. But I think the biggest one, I think one of the biggest names we're going to see and already have seen is, Walter Nolan from Texas A&M, former number 2 recruit in that crazy 2022 class. He committed to the Texas A&M over Bama, Georgia, Florida, Michigan, and Tennessee. So I fully expect him to look at either Alabama or Georgia and decide to go to one of those schools. I think he'd be dumb not to, but
it's crazy because Georgia finished second with Walter Nolan and Shamar Stewart, and they both went to Texas A&M. It'd be pretty awesome if Georgia could beef up their defensive line a little bit. Like I was just telling you, obviously our defensive line's not what it has been the past couple of years. We lose a bunch of those guys to the first round of the draft. It's going to happen. You're going to have a down year probably in defensive line after that. So if Georgia could go get at least one of those guys from Texas A&M, and then obviously I think they did have some young guys that were freshmen and sophomores this year come up next year and, be able to play, especially and also one thing I saw the other day that kind of was crazy for me, but a lot of people were saying Mykel Williams has been getting reached out to by Lincoln Riley at USC. I think that'd be a mistake. if you want to leave
Mhm.
Georgia and go to USC,
USC.
that'd be a huge mistake. But
Yeah.
it doesn't look likely. That's just something I heard that they were talking to him about. But it would be stupid for him to do that, in my opinion. But yeah, like I said, we're gonna have the transfer portal talk every week now, since it's gonna be big until it's closed. And then we'll also kind of talk about the high school recruiting as well as that gets closer. But let's go to our next segment. Obviously, we're going to need to talk about this college football playoff extravaganza that happened this
Love that
past
word.
week. So at number one, they finished off with, this is the final rankings. They finished off with Michigan at 1, Washington at 2, Texas at 3, and Alabama at 4. Let's talk about this a little bit. We're gonna dive into this. Just want all the guests to know that are watching, like we're gonna dive into this more near the playoffs and near those games. So probably like the last week of December, we'll really dive into these games and talk about them more in depth. But right now, we're just gonna talk about what happened exactly. Um, Michigan obviously wins their game, they're in. We knew that. Washington wins their game, they're in. Now at 3 and 4, you have Texas and Alabama. Are they the big thing was, okay, is Florida State going to get in over one of these teams? Is Alabama going to get in at 4? Is Florida State going to get in at 4? Is Texas really going to be that number 4 team or number 3 team? How is this going to work? How is it going to shake out? Is Georgia going to move down all the way out of the top 4 after losing to a really good team? Um, I know, Brennan, you were talking about this. I don't think that the committee thought that Bama was going to beat Georgia, so they kept them at 8, and that kind of
Yep.
fucked them in the end of things because they had to bring Bama
Yep.
all the way up from 8 to 4. They had to bring Georgia
Mhm.
all the way out of the top 4 because of that. Even though you go 12 and 1, you didn't win your conference championship, and I hate that that's something that is like taken against you in this. It sucks for a team that goes undefeated during a hard SEC schedule, especially with Georgia's back half of their SEC schedule facing 3 ranked teams in a row, and beating them handedly. So, and then losing to Bama by 3 in a game where they made a bunch of mistakes and the most mistakes they've made all season. So that sucks for them. But, you kind of knew that if Georgia lost that game, they weren't going to be put in. FSU wins their ACC championship game. They're 13-0. And they're sitting there on, the college game day or college football playoff picks that day. They're sitting there kind of waiting, and you see Alabama go up at number 4, and you just see all of FSU kids, some of them in the back, just start walking out of the room. You see the coach get up, telling kids to sit back down. He wants to have a talk, all this shit. They're pissed off. It makes sense why they're pissed off. You finished 13-0. You are not one of the top 4 teams at the end of the season right now. Doesn't matter what you did earlier in the season. You have not been up to par offensively because of your quarterback getting hurt. And that's just a fucking part of the game. When there's only 4 teams you can put in, dude, you have to pick the 4 best teams at the moment. You can't pick who has been good all
I
season.
disagree with this. I disagree with this because if we're gonna put the 4 best teams in, and we're gonna do lines like this, we're just gonna make lines. Then why is Georgia not in there? Throw Washington out. They went 13-0,
Yeah.
won their conference.
No,
Yeah,
no,
but
I agree. But they
I mean,
all, I think also
we can't hide behind the
Florida's.
facade of saying 4 best teams if the 4 best teams aren't even in the playoff.
Well, let
Yeah,
me break this down for you a little bit, just so I think that this will kind of give you some clarity on this. They kept Louisville obviously ranked pretty high because they knew that Florida State was going to play them in the ACC championship. Okay, and just like Louisville, obviously deservedly so, has won their games to be in that championship. They're going to be ranked. I think they're ranked a little bit too high. But they go and they win that game. They don't have their starting quarterback. They don't have their second string quarterback. Their offense is running at a quarter of what it usually does. Their defense is elite, but is the defense going to be able to beat a Michigan or a Washington? I don't think so. So
yeah.
you kind of also go down to, okay, so if you're looking
But
at that,
okay, keep going.
then you said Washington.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Washington. Washington beat ranked teams. They beat Oregon twice when the committee pretty much thought that Oregon was going to beat them. Like the committee pretty much put it on there like, hey, we think Oregon's going to win this game. We're already setting this up. like they're going to win. So we're just going to wait for that to happen. Oregon ends up losing. Washington ends up beating them. They're not going to be out. They're not going to be out of the playoff. I think that Washington truly is one of the 4 best teams. I do.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but they also played close with like Washington State and Arizona State. Those aren't good.
They did. Yeah. They did. But Michigan also played in close games, and so did Texas. And so did Bama.
So did Alabama. Yeah.
So so did Georgia.
State, though.
But they won the big games when it.
But they won the big. They won those big games when it counts and when it matters. Yeah. And like Brennan was saying,
lose, though.
That's just the argument. It's just I don't see if you're going to say 4 best, why we don't have the 4 best in there, and why we're.
I think it's the 4 best that it's the 4 best that you can what's the word I'm looking for, that you can actually explain or like get away with. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like it's the 4 best that you can like clearly put in there and not have a bunch of backlash from. Because if Georgia stays in and Washington's out, and now you have Michigan, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama, all those are probably the 4 best teams or something close to it. You have no merit to stand on to take Washington out. They have done nothing to get taken out. They still have their quarterback. The quarterback's in the Heisman finalist. They still have a wide receiver that has over 1,500 yards receiving. They have a running back who's had over 100 games in like 6 games this season. They have a defense that has completely shut down a other Heisman finalist in Bo Nix. Or I don't know, is he a Heisman finalist? I don't know if he is or not. But
shut down.
So.
But that's the thing I'm saying is like in the first half at least, you know. So I think Washington can be in there, and I think that I think Georgia could have been there. I think Georgia could have been in over fucking Michigan. I think Michigan's offense has looked like shit the past couple of weeks. So what can they prove or at least make look like is the top 4 teams, you know? Yeah. And this is what they could prove, and this is what they could put on paper and say, this is why we did it. This is what we're going to do, and we can tell you exactly how. If Georgia's in, they can't give you a clear answer.
I think I watched a video on Brian Kelly speaking on it earlier today on Twitter, and he explained it perfectly, man. They created this system with 4 spots. Well, guess what? There's 5 Power 5 conferences. Like there's five Power 5 conferences. So did they ever think they were going to get 3 undefeated conference champions and 2 one-loss conference champions? Like, probably not, but it just so happened to be this year. And I want to address the Florida State and the 3rd-string QB and the relation to Cardale Jones and Ohio State. It's like, look, man, what did Florida State do without their starting quarterback? They they kind of skated by a mediocre Florida team in the swamp. Tough game, absolutely, but, you know, didn't look great. Easily could have lost that game, but had a good comeback. And then they go up against probably, I mean, I wouldn't say Louisville's worse than Iowa, but like one of the worst conference championship opponents in all Power 5 conferences, and they win 16-6 and only put up 200 yards of total offense. Guess what Cardale Jones did in his conference championship against Wisconsin in that year? They won that game 56-0. And then the committee was like, because they were planning on leaving Ohio State out. Ohio State was like number 5 or 6. They were like, they're not going to make it in. They're on their 3rd-string QB. They're probably hardly going to skate by Wisconsin. Well, guess what Ohio State and Cardale Jones did? They won 56-0, and the committee's like, oh, shit. Looks like this team hasn't taken a step back at all. They just waxed a team that we thought was pretty good. So it's like they showed the ability to still compete at a very high level, even with a 3rd-string quarterback. And Florida State didn't really show that. I mean, I get that it's a full team and their defense looked great. But if you go into that game against Michigan, number 1, number 2 defense in the country, do you think they're going to be able to put up a point against them? Probably not. I mean, it looked just like the Big Ten championship just did. It'd be 20. Yeah, they'd probably do decent on defense, hold Michigan to 20 or so points, but it'd probably be 24-0. And you'd be like, well, shit, why did we put them in? Like, because they deserved it. It's like, no, guess what they did when Cincinnati got in? They deserve it. They get beat fucking 29-6 by Alabama, and the game looked a lot worse than that final score did. And it's just like, I think at that point they were finally, and then obviously seeing TCU last year, which granted they did somehow beat Michigan, but I just don't think at the end of the day, it is also entertainment, as shitty as that sounds to say. It is entertainment, and what people don't want to see is a 65-7 national championship or a playoff game that's 33-0. You know, when you can control it and be like, hey, you know, this team just isn't that good anymore. We'd rather see an Alabama team who just knocked off the number one team who hadn't lost a game in 29 games. Like, this team deserves to get their chance and, you know, play and go for it. You know, I like we said, it just absolutely sucks for Florida State that had to happen. But, you know, if, like Jordan Travis has said, I wish I would have gotten hurt earlier in the season and these guys could have shown you. I'm like, dude, if you would have gotten hurt earlier in the season, y'all probably wouldn't be undefeated.
You wouldn't have beat Clemson.
Like, yeah,
you wouldn't.
You know, you wouldn't be undefeated.
Yeah, but
so.
the quarterbacks would have had time to play a little more football.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
So you want to give them time to play in the playoff against these teams that are at 100%?
Well, what I'm arguing, they got boned for two reasons. They got boned because the committee's soft and they have no backbone. Their rankings every other week from now have been fucking terrible. If this is what we're gonna lean it towards, why are we ranking Alabama at 8 and Texas right behind Oregon? If you're gonna have them both fucking just jump and get in with Florida State is undefeated. I don't care what Florida State does. That's just a terrible ranking. I mean,
and that's what I mean. I've been trying to. I know we were all high on Oregon, but I tried to make that point a few weeks ago. It's like, if you're basing off of their ranking guidelines, Oregon should have never been ranked above Texas and Alabama. Never. Agreed. Both of them had. Oregon's loss was the best loss, but Texas and Alabama had beat ranked teams down the stretch and played good games, while Oregon hadn't. I mean, you know, by week 9, all the teams that were ranked when Oregon beat them had lost a few more games, and we're all like, oh, those teams weren't as good as we thought they were. So Oregon had 0 ranked wins. And it's like, if you're going off the guidelines of the committee, resume, strength of schedule, strength of record, it's like Texas and Alabama had all of that better than Oregon. So they like we mentioned earlier, they had their thoughts in mind of who they thought was going to win these games in the championship games in week 8. So like I said, they thought Oregon was going to beat Washington. They thought Georgia was just going to handle Alabama, so they didn't have to deal with Alabama. They were just going to leave them down at 8. And then, when they lost, they probably would have just left them at 8 again.
And
so it's
Florida State also got boned by the fact that this is the last year of a 4 team. And we have had those losses where they're just fucking they don't even want to see the game. So
Josh Pate said it best.
They're like, fuck it. State's gonna get in next year. And this year we're just gonna have one of the best 4 teams, or like the best viewing experience possible. And so I think that's kind of what happened.
Josh Pate said it best, man. He said Florida State can just ride off into the sunset. They can say they got screwed by the committee.
They can
say
claim
if they would have made it. Yeah, they could have said if they would have made it in, they would have won. You know, like, they can just claim that, you know, that just fucking ride off into the sunset. Say you got screwed. Say you would have won the national championship if they would have let us in. There you go. Take it.
I think it's funny, too, because they had Kirby and Norvell, after explaining their criteria and their decision, they had them both in a meeting about the bowl game they're about to play. And neither of those motherfuckers wanted to be there. I mean, if I'm Norvell, I'm already at the NCAA's front door trying to burn it down. And Kirby, if they're telling you 4 bests and they leave you out, then I'd be pissed too. So, you know, that's going to be an interesting bowl game. I know we'll talk about it later, but that's going to be one of the funner ones.
No, I thoroughly hope Florida State. I thoroughly hope Florida State, all their guys play and they try to prove themselves against Georgia, who should be a top 4 team as well, and just get absolutely donkey slapped. And
I think they're going to get embarrassed.
I mean, maybe. Maybe
Georgia
maybe the
might
committee
not
was
have
right.
A lot of guys that might not play. So
that would work for the committee. But if Florida State won that game, oh fuck! I want to see riots in the streets.
There would be. Well, then they can claim, if they do win that game, they can claim a national title by the rules. So
they can. There'll be
just like UCF.
That's 2 champions in Florida.
UCF did it in 2017 when they fucking beat Auburn in their bowl game after
2
going
champions with 0 trophies.
Let's go ahead and go to. Do we have producer Christian? Do we have a best bet segment of our recap of last week or no? Okay. We don't. But we're going to just tell you guys, we went 1-1 last week. We had Texas minus 13.5. We had Oregon minus 9.5. Oregon obviously gets beat, so they fucked us in that. So we don't have anything for that one. But I did want to kind of bring up, obviously, we are going to go into the bowl games, and we'll start bringing up some games that we want to talk about every week. And we're going to bring up some of the games that we think are the most appealing. And obviously, we're going to talk about the New Year's Six a lot. We're going to talk about the playoff. We're going to talk about the Georgia-Florida or Florida State game. These are going to be games we're going to discuss. But we have not really set up anything for bets this week, obviously, because bowl games don't start this weekend.
Hey guys, let's not forget about the Army-Navy game now. America's game right there. I don't know.
Yes.
I'm trying to look at the spread right now. What do we got?
Let's just
Army minus 2.5.
Off the dome bets right here.
Hey,
we're taking
I
half.
I am excited though for us to be able to talk about all these bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also excited for us to talk about the Heisman votes and the Jim Thorpe Award and the Broyles Award, all these coach awards as well. So we're gonna discuss a lot of these awards that are coming up this weekend for next week, just to have something to talk about. Obviously, we're not gonna have a lot of football to talk about next week.
Hopefully, we'll see some more movement on the transfer portal and stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll definitely see some.
By then, I think we're gonna have a lot. So the segments next week are gonna be a little bit different than how they usually are. We're gonna have more of talking points other than games. But it's still going to be entertaining like it always is. Thank you guys for joining this week, Rich and Brennan. It is a pleasure like always. We will see you guys next week.
All right.
See y'all boys later.
See y'all.